Fathers of Reddit, do you have any funny stories of being your daughter's overprotective dad? Story 1, I was on the other end of maybe the most awkward version of this ever. Me and two buddies ended up in a friend's who was a girl living room. Her dad started doing the prototypical shotgun cleaning in the living room. That was awkward, but then this exchange happens. Her dad, what the are you doing? Him just making sure. Her, there are 3 guys here. What do you think would do sleep with them all? Him, you're your mother's daughter. Her mortified, it was awesome. Story 2, a young boy kissed my 3-year-old daughter full on the lips at a birthday party and exclaimed to the world his undying love for her and professing the need to make babies. Before I could correct the situation, my daughter cocked back and smashed the boy in his mouth. See, Daddy, just like you taught me. Edit a word. Story 3, mine is a little different, but I know I am in trouble and will be that overprotective dad. My daughter, who is 9, has a few little boys that like her. I told her the other day, just to let you know, the first boy you bring home, I'm going to have to shoot him just to make a point. She looked at me. Not missing a beat, she told me, well, I guess I should bring the ugly one home first. I am screwed. Story 4, not my daughter, but my niece. My nieces bring their boyfriends over to meet me for the obligatory "he will crush you if you mess with me" speech. I'm a very large 67, 325-pound shave-headed, tattooed motorcycle riding man. I usually give this speech in a jovial manner and try to get the guy laughing, or at least smiling, so he knows I'm not just some out-of-control head. One time at a party, my niece's then boyfriend got pretty toasted and started berating my little niece. She came to me in tears, and that did it. He was sitting on a couch with several of his friends, and when I walked up, he looked up and said, "What you gonna do?" I then picked him smooth up off that couch and one quick motion smacked his head on the ceiling. I lowered him down to my face level and calmly told him that crashing sound he just heard and felt was God calling him home. And that meant it was time to die. He started crying right there in front of his friends, and soon everyone was laughing at him, so he got pouty mad and left the party. They did not stay together very long after the party, if I remember correctly. LOL. Story 5, not me, but a friend. He's a cop, and his daughter brought home her male friend. As he was walking by, the cop father said, "Catch," and tossed something small at the boy. The boy caught it and looked at what it was. It was a bullet, cop father said. "Nice catch. Be careful. The next one might come a little faster." Story 6, my daughter isn't quite old enough, yet turns 1 in 3 days for me to be the overprotective dad. But I have a story about my stepdad and my sister that I love to tell. The day after my wedding, I went down to the hotel's dining area for some breakfast, only to be greeted by my frantic mother. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I'm so embarrassed, and I'm so sorry. I hope we didn't ruin your wedding." I had no idea what she was talking about, so I had her explain. Apparently, my sister's asshat boyfriend, who we'll call Joe, had a little too much to drink at the reception and got verbally abusive toward her back in their hotel room. My sister, upset, called down to my parents' room and asked for my stepdad to come down and try to help calm Joe down. My stepdad walked down the hall to my sister's room and got an expletive-laden earful from Joe. My stepdad stepped out into the hallway, probably to prevent himself from popping Joe in the jaw, and Joe followed him, saying, "He'll talk to that however I want to." My mom, upon hearing that, got between Joe and my stepdad. Joe then proceeded to get in my mom's face and push her on the shoulder with his fingers. That didn't sit well with my stepdad, who, in addition to being built like a brick shithouse, is a Marine and a trained fighter. In front of everyone who had a room on that floor, which included all of my wife's family, my stepdad grabbed Joe, put him in a submission hold of some sort, carried him to the elevator, rode down 3 floors, and literally threw him out the hotel's front door into the cold, January, Wisconsin weather and told him not to come back upstairs until he sobered up and apologized to my sister. As my sister was Joe's ride, Joe called his father to come pick him up at the hotel, a 90-minute ride for Joe's dad. As far as I know, he never did apologize to my sister, and it still took my sister 2 more months to break up with that idiot. Story 7, I try to not be the overprotective dad. That's so last century, man. Instead, I've given her my sense of humor and critical analysis mindset. Take that, hormonal teenage boys. Story 8, as a brother to what I suspect to be a KGB sleeper agent, I don't think I'll ever need to be protective. A boy groped my 13-year-old sister's thigh, once right in front of me, the cocky, and she immediately turned round, and Falcon punched his 2 front teeth in his windpipe. Someone actually had to slap him on the back to stop him choking. Story 9, my sister had a bad habit of dating in dicks. My dad has the mountain man beard, and before this day, I had never seen him clean-shaven. While boyfriend was over and he asked why my dad has no beard today, my dad responded, "I only shave it when I kill someone." Story 10, we were at a Chuck E. Cheese-like establishment, and our daughter was playing the play area. She was about 2 at the time. They have an area with multiple slides, all lined up so the kids can race as our daughter was heading down her slide, and a little boy slid down the slide next to her. During their descent, he reached over and grabbed her arm. and was pulling and twisting it. She responded with a panicked help me shriek, and my so responded with the loudest growl scream I've ever heard. It was a simple HEY to get the attention of the boy so he would release her, but it was as if a jet was ripping through the air. It was so loud and booming. If you've ever been in one of these places, the noise is just ridiculous, and the moment my so screamed, the entire place fell silent, like church silent. You could hear a cricket. Once the complete silence lifted and white noise began to fill the room, I gave him the "Are you kidding me?" look. His response: "I don't care if he's 2 or 12. If he hurts my daughter, I'll rip his head off." Thankfully, he has relaxed a bit through the years. Story 11, daughter of an overprotective dad here. My dad died 10 years ago, but I would like to share my favorite story on this topic. I was a 16-year-old virgin and had my first serious boyfriend. We were in my room where we were not supposed to be, but we weren't doing anything terrible, just sitting on my bed talking. My dad apparently heard us and opens the door and only says "you here now" while pointing at my boyfriend. Now, a little backstory on my dad. He was a Vietnam vet and a former drill sergeant with the U.S. Army. He was very, very intimidating when he wanted to be, but only reserved that side of himself for specific situations. This apparently being one of them. So my boyfriend follows my dad into the living room and is told to put his shoes on. He does as he is told, thinking that he was just being sent home. My dad then says we're going on a walk, and they both exit the front door. 2 hours later, they come back from their walk. I asked my boyfriend what they talked about or what my dad said to him, and he said he swore he would never tell me. A few years later, my dad dies, and I actually end up married to that boyfriend after a 4-year relationship. I thought for sure he would spill the beans on what they talked about, seeing that my dad had passed away and we were married. Nope, he said he promised and he would never tell me. We're divorced now, and he still won't tell me. Apparently my dad was so intimidating that even in his grave he can scare the out of people. Edit, I added these pictures to another comment down below, but wanted to share them here as well. They're just some pictures of my dad, including an awesome beard from the 70s, his beautiful penmanship, a spaceship he designed, and proof of cat love. Story 12, I work at an anime convention, and a lot of parents come through with their children. One day, a father and his daughter, who was dressed in a skimpy outfit, came up to buy passes. While the daughter chose her cosplay character as her badge name, her dad's badge read SHES14, and I own a shotgun. Story 13, I had a GFS dad when I was in college tell me, "Anything you do to my daughter, it'll do to you," coming from a 66 Army Ranger with quite an intimidating demeanor. It made me feel a bit awkward. Luckily, he didn't follow through on the threat. Edit obligatory, of course. My top comment would be about an Army Ranger's threat to me. Story 14, I'm not a father, but I do have a related story. When I was 17, I went to go pick up a girl I was dating at her house. At the time, I was wearing jeans with many holes all down the front, because for some reason, I thought it was fashionable. When I get to her house, her father opens the door. He looks me over and tells me to wait outside for a second. He returns a half-minute later with a roll of duct tape and proceeds to tape up every last hole on my jeans. I didn't realize at the time, but the man was doing God's work. Story 15, not a father, but I am very protective of my 15-year-old little sister. She goes to boarding school. She is a little genius about 45 minutes away from where I go to college. One day, she called me crying about some guy who wouldn't stop texting her and waited for her outside of her classes. The final straw for her was when she saw him watching her from different spots on her running route 4 days in a row. So I got in my car and drove down to her school. When I got there, she met me in the parking lot and explained how his texts kept getting angrier and angrier when she stopped responding. I'm a pretty stereotypical college pothead. I'm into all of that peace and love stuff, and it takes a lot for me to lose my temper. However, texting my sister 6 times without a response and calling her will make me go berserk. So after I took her out to lunch, I asked some of her friends if they knew where I could find the kid. After being pointed in the right direction, I eventually found him walking around outside of my sister's dorm. I walked up to him, introduced myself as her loving older brother, and proceeded to tell him that if he continued giving her problems, that he and I would have a very serious issue. She hasn't heard from him since. TLDR, little sister had a kid borderline stalking her at her school. Big brother swoops in to save the day. Story 16, my father once shoved and then literally threw a boy out the front door of our house after I invited him over without my parents at home. Apparently a neighbor called my dad at work. We were actually just watching TV. Story 17, had to take her 12 to buy volleyball shorts. Fathers avoid this at all costs. Apparently, private part shrink wrap is the correct size. I kept sending her back in to try on larger sizes until she finally said, with an exasperated look, "Dad, these are the biggest size they make, everything about that." I got involved with this boy when I was 14. He was 16 and on the wrestling team. One day, I cracked a joke at his expense. I'd do this with all my friends, and he backhanded me and told me he wasn't someone to insult. I was in shock. I don't remember exactly what I said, but I told him he would regret hurting me. I grabbed my stuff and took off for home. It was a 45-minute walk, so I get home, and my brother asks me why I'm home from school in the middle of the day. Then he sees my face, my cheek was bright red, and I had the beginnings of a real shiner. My brother got an ice pack, gave it to me, and told me to start talking. I relay what happened. I went to my room to cry and try to calm down. I came down a few hours later, and my brother was gone. He didn't come back until after supper. The next day at school, my now ex-boyfriend wasn't there. I was pretty relieved because I had no idea how to handle it. Same thing the next day, and the next, he missed that entire week of school. Week after, my eyes pretty much healed, and he shows up with a broken arm, broken nose, and stitches in his swollen lip. He saw me, and fear flashed across his face. My brother denies ever laying a finger on him and refuses to tell me exactly what he did or who he talked to about it. Looking back, I should have told my parents, but we were not on good terms then, and my brother has always been there for me. Most times I don't even need to ask for his help. He just sees through me and does what needs to be done. Story 18, my only regret for not having a daughter is the fact that I won't be able to greet at the door and let him know that I'm not afraid to go back to prison. I'm not a dad, but was on the receiving end of an overprotective father. Flashback a few years to my first year of med school and recently graduated from an engineering school. First, going from engineering girls to med school girls is fantastic and naturally, when after a drop-dead, gorgeous blonde med student a year above me. We hit off well, and soon after started to formally date and go to meet her family. We ended up getting to her hometown a few minutes early, and her dad, a pediatrician, says to come by the hospital so we can meet while the rest of her family gets ready. Her dad is one of those types that may be 50, but is more physically fit and active than most 20-year-old guys, so much so that his arms never quite could be put down to his sides because he had too much muscle. We meet in the atrium of his fancy hospital, muscle bulging from his arms, and politely shake hands until I lost circulation in my fingers. Polite bullshitting ensues about how nice his daughter is. He then invites us up to his floor as he has a few circs to perform. Now I'm only in my third month of med school, so I look at my older GF and ask, what is a circ? Turns out that the circumcision is all that is going through my head. We enter the circ room, to where he has about 5 babies lined up ready to go. For those unfamiliar, the baby is strapped to a board, exposed entirely, and with a swift guillotine device. The foreskin is chopped off. I assist with all of the procedures as the GF stand in a corner laughing at me, becoming petrified of her dad. We ended up breaking up very clean break. And to this day, I cannot be mad at her dad for how I met him, as chopping off baby penis foreskin remains the most effective way to scare the out of boy. TLDR, my Hulk Hogan-esque ex's father made me perform circumcisions with him for the first time that we met. I dated a black girl in high school. I am white, and during the time period, I was a hipster in doing so. When she invited me over to her home, her mother told me that her daddy is locked up, but he will be out soon, so make sure you treat his baby girl with respect. I found out later that her father never was locked up. He was overseas in the military at that time, which would have been just as effective in keeping me afraid. When he returned home, and I met him after 2 years, he turned out to be a real nice guy. Dated his daughter for 4 years, and ended up breaking it off very respectfully due to her job as a stripper. Another story for another time. Story 19, my dad was actually pretty funny with my sister. It was a Friday afternoon, and my sister was introducing her boyfriend to my dad. After exchanging pleasantries, her boyfriend asked what time would you like her back by, to which my dad responded, have her back by Sunday. Story 20, we moved into a new neighborhood. I was outside in the yard when I saw my daughter walking home from the bus. This boy on a bike rides by and says, hey, who are you? For no reason, I said, no one you need to be talking to. Keep riding, little man. They were both about 6 years old. I just looked at her and told her ID explain later. Edit, did people read the question this thread was started under? It asks about overprotective, not well-adjusted level of protection. To all the glorious Captain Hindites of Reddit, thank you for pointing out my mistake. Story 21, I got invited to prom my freshman year of high school. I went out, bought a dress, shoes, everything. 2 weeks before prom, the friend of mine that was taking me came by the house. My stepdad literally cleaned a shotgun in front of him and talked about how nice it was to live near so much land that no one ever used. Guess who didn't go to prom that year? Story 22, my ex-girlfriend's father told me that if I hurt his daughter, he would cut my off, hang them from the ceiling fan, and make them repeatedly hit me as they go around. Story 23, the boyfriend of my oldest daughter went up to her room to change into some shorts. The door to the upstairs was next to the couch I was playing some games on. Everyone else was outside running through multiple sprinklers in the backyard. I decided to inform the young man on his way outside after changing that. You are an alright kid, but if I ever catch you coming out of my daughter's room with different pants than you went up with. Jimmy, you seem like a good kid. ID, hate to have to kill ya. Evident ally. I was a little too sincere whilst trying to be funny. After being brought to task by my wife and daughter, I had to go up into my daughter's room and explain I was only playing told him if I was going to kill ID, already done it, and he should get out from behind bed and come downstairs. Story 24, my dad is very overprotective. My fiance used to be long distance, and on our first anniversary, he came to my state to visit. The first time he met my father, he was cleaning his guns and loading them very calmly. It backfired, and my fiance just got so excited over the guns and started asking about where he got them and started a conversation. We still could not go on a date or be without a chaperone at all times. Story 25, oh sure. I've been terrorizing my daughter's boyfriends as often as possible. My family has always been the type that pokes fun, pranks, teases, and generally screw with each other for the love. Any boy that can't handle it has no place here, so I think that he needs a little testing to make sure. My most recent, well, this was a pretty standard ploy, but hey, my daughter was dating this kid. He was actually not a bad guy, had a pretty epic beard, so I gave him some respect for that. However, he was pretty timid, and that's sort of irresistible for me. He had asked her to his prom, they went to different HS, and had shown up to pick her up. Two important things. One, my daughter is beautiful, seriously, and that's not just dad pride. When she dresses up, she's pretty stunning, but doesn't do it often, and normally is a ponytail, no makeup, sweats kind of girl. Second, that morning I had taken my son out to the shooting range, so I'm still in my orange shirt and tactical vest and pants. I left my 9mm out on the coffee table for cleaning after I put a few hundred rounds through it, so this guy shows up, my girlfriend lets him in while he's standing there, waiting for my daughter to come downstairs. I say nothing and just look at him while I finish cleaning my gun. I finish up, put the barrel back in, and put the slide in place, but don't rack it back yet. Just at that moment, my daughter comes downstairs, the classic reveal moment from the landing. She's got on a strapless, formal dress, blonde hair up with curls, basically all dolled up, and looks amazing. His jaw drops a bit. This is the first time he's seen her dressed to the nines as he's staring at her coming down the stairs. I pull the slide and rack it a few times, loudly. He actually jumped, looks at me, and turns a bit pale, which is amusing on a guy normally dark olive-skinned. My daughter actually stifles a laugh, then comes down to reassure the boy. We had some lovely pictures, one of me with my arm around his shoulder and my gun holster in the front of my pants. Amusingly, he's a Sikh, so I actually challenged him to a sword fight, Punjabi style. Unfortunately, my daughter dumped him before we got a chance. Story 26, I was once accused of being the reason for my daughter breaking up with a guy. He said that I set an impossibly high standard for anyone wanting to date my daughters to try to match. I hope that I'm guilty as charged. If not, I will attempt to be. I'm especially humble. It's probably my best feature. Story 27, my oldest daughter, who is now 18, had her first date when she was 15. I always joked with her that I would be cleaning my gun with the first boy she dated. My wife always said, no, do not do that, it's too mean. Well, the day comes, and I decide to call up a good friend and go to the shooting range that day. Although this is no ordinary day at the range, I fill my friend in, he laughs, and wants to have fun with it too. We went to the range in full Rambo mode. I wore my tacked vest with pistol attached, took my AR, threw on my shotgun just for giggles. I also took another pistol in a leg holster, did the whole 9 yards. My friend did the same. We looked absolutely idiotic. Fast forward to 7 p.m. We make sure we get to my house, just before he's due to arrive. We end up getting there just as they were leaving. Imagine two guys, my friend is 6'5", fully rammed out, walking up the driveway. I walked up to my daughter and asked her to introduce us. The sheer horror on this kid's face was absolutely priceless. I was in the doghouse for weeks, but worth it. Story 28, my daughter's mad at me for only buying cars with manual transmissions. She learned how to drive stick growing up and even took her driver's test with a manual transmission car. One night during her college years, she came home from a first date, arms folded, glaring at me. What's wrong? I asked. He seemed like a really nice guy, but he didn't even know how to drive a stick shift. Not sure if that qualifies as overprotective, but it sure does seem to narrow her choices to guys with basic life competencies. Story 29, my daughter was 8 at the time. She looked lovely in her jeans and purple leather bomber jacket, blonde hair and a ponytail. We were at a shopping mall. She was walking with her mom and grandma a dozen steps ahead of me and my father. I noticed some approaching males looking at her as they walked past. You could tell that some of them were dads too. They would smile at her as they passed. They had a look of admiration in their eyes. This one fellow walks towards us. Here looks at her. Fine, no problem. But when he passes her, he turns his head to look at her behind. It was a terribly creepy, prolonged stare at her bum. I changed my direction slightly, and with his face looking in the opposite direction from where he was walking, he slammed into me. I said, "She's ate you." His face immediately flushed, as if had been caught doing and thinking things he shouldn't, which made me even angrier. He blurts out a few half words and short gulps while making a hasty retreat. I should mention I was 30 at the time, standing 6 feet tall and a muscular 210 pounds. I was ready and wanted to tear him apart. I don't think I was overprotective at all. Story 30. I'm the daughter of an overprotective father. My dad used to make meals full of yummy garlic. I loved garlic before parties when I was a teenager. It wasn't until years later I realized I probably smelled like garlic at all my high school parties. I confronted him about it, and he smiled and said, "I wondered when you'd realize I'm not too bright." Story 31. Only daughter of my dad here. I can share a story. My dad went through my garbage every day until he found a condom. It was like he was waiting to find one, and eventually did. That day was when I learned the meaning of the phrase, when hits the fan. Story 32. My daughter is now 7, and I haven't had to get to that overprotective stage yet. However, I do have a 15-year-old sister. I'm 34, and she's a big internet user. And I have had to explain about not giving personal information to people and never sending naked pictures to boys. I doubt she would. But you never know. What I did say was, if you get a creeper asking you for pictures, etc., just send them this and say you made it just for them. Hi guys, apparently it's NSFW. Story 33. TLDR. I made my cousin's date nearly himself several times over the course of their date. My methods earned him another date and later a relationship with her. My cousin lived with my family for a while. Her dad wasn't in the picture, and her mom was working a seasonal job in Alaska. One day, her boyfriend was coming over to pick her up and take her on a date. I don't think they were dating yet. This was their first date, I believe. I had been wanting to scare him as soon as I found out what was going on. I put some sweet tea into a Jack Daniels bottles, had my rifle set up on my lap, and I was rocking in my rocking chair. When he came up, I was sipping out of one of the bottles pretty heavy. I asked him if he wanted any. He politely said no thank you. So I chugged what he thought was a third of a bottle of straight whiskey without flinching. He nearly himself. I looked him straight in the eye and said to him, "If you even think about touching my cousin in any inappropriate ways, he'll make sure you're singing castrato by midnight. If you hurt my cousin, he'll make sure to put you down like the dogs that won't hunt. You will open doors and pull her chair out for her. You will have her home by 11 p.m. sharp. You will be a true gentleman on this date. You know what happens if you don't? I've been drinking, so I won't feel as bad as I would sober." I'm pretty sure he's pants then. I grabbed another of the bottles and started pulling from it. They came back later that night while I was still awake, and I saw them standing on the doorstep talking. She kissed him on the cheek. I took the opportunity to go around the side of the house unnoticed and scare him. As she went in, he came back to his car. I was standing next to it sharpening my knife. He froze in place. I told him I'd seen what he was up to and what he did. He started apologizing, saying he'd try not to mess up. I pulled him off the ground and told him that he had done nothing wrong, and I appreciate him treating my cousin right. He was so happy that he wasn't losing his and ended up having a laugh. I told him all of the stuff was planned, and it was just a bunch of tricks to scare him. My cousin said that had been nervous the entire night and hadn't touched her. She figured I had something to do with it, but let it go as she was happy he wasn't acting like most douchebags she dated, that his nervousness and politeness had earned him another date. Story 34. My dad isn't the type to put the fear of God into a guy I'm dating, but my 10 years older half-brother, 64, 350 pounds, has no qualms with it. My older sister was kind of when she was about 16 and with any guy in a U.S. military uniform. So she pretty much ruined dating for me after getting busted with a Marine. Once I got my first serious boyfriend, my brother paid close attention. He gave me the safe speech and made it very clear to the deaf kid, while signing no less, that if he hurt me or knocked me up, being deaf was the least of his physical concerns. Story 35. Before my daughter was even born, I was at a youth league soccer game for my nephews. While on the phone with my best friend, he was talking about how a baby girl was God's way of punishing me for being... I said to him, I don't care if she turns out to be a lesbian as long as she doesn't end up pregnant at 15. The women near me almost died with shock. Story 36. Not so much an overprotective dad, but an overprotective brother. So when this story took place, I was in 8th grade, and my sister was in 4th. So the little brother of the 8th grade asshat, while calling Pete, made it clear to everyone that he had a thing for my sister. So one day, I was out throwing the discus for track with my friend, and Pete decided to come out and watch. After a while, he decides to start bragging about how he made his move on my sister, and that she was his for the picking. So, naturally, I gently pick up the child and tell him that if I ever hear of him doing anything with my sister, he would wish he had never been born. I then proceeded to gently set him back down and ask him to go get a discus I had just thrown, and when he went out to get it, just to prove my point, I threw another discus that landed right next to him and scared the out of him. TLDR little asshat said my sister was his property, proceeded to tell him otherwise, edit spelling. Story 37. My father was he would clean guns when my friends would come over and look down the barrel and ask them if it looked clean. This is why, when he asked to meet my serious high school boyfriend, I refused to make the introduction. My date could not drive, so his father brought him over to pick me up for a date. The second I saw the car in the driveway, I bolted outside. As I climbed into the back seat, I just saw the garage door open, and there, silhouetted in the light, was my father with a rifle and scope train on the car. My boyfriend's dad started laughing and bellowed, "You better get up there and meet that man, son." But I sternly asked him to please throw the car in reverse and leave immediately. On my first date ever, my father drove up to my group of friends, and I walked into the movie theater, trained a deer shining spotlight on our group, and called out on a bullhorn, which he borrowed from a cop friend. "Which one of you is Zach?" Zach went over to have a brief chat with him, and to this day, I don't know what was said, but there was a lot of space between Zach and myself for the first half of the movie. Story 38, my mom has a photo that Grandma took of my grandpa, standing on their porch looking through a pair of binoculars with a rifle in his hand. Story goes, she was at the end of the property in a car with her new boyfriend when the picture was taken. I know, Mom, not daughter. Story 39, my father had a lot of friends who were trash men. So when my sister started dating, he took the guy to the side, and he said, like, "If you ever treat my daughter badly, then I will make sure no one will ever find your body." He was frozen in fear. Good guy, though. Story 40, when my dad found out my sister had a boyfriend, he insisted that she bring him home so he could meet him. He came in the house, and my sister called for him to come meet her boyfriend. He comes downstairs into the living room and says, "Hi, I'm her dad, and I can kick your." Then he walked out of the room. If you knew my dad, you know he was kidding around, but for that guy, he seemed scared shitless. Story 41, daughter of an overprotective father. When I hit puberty in 8th grade for about 2 months, every week I was sat down and told how boys only want, and if I had, I would get preggers and ruin my life like my aunts. It was extremely awkward. Story 42, early on, I told my daughter's current boyfriend that if he ever crossed certain lines, I wouldn't be done until he stopped twitching. It was, of course, a joke, but there was just enough undertone of potential for it to be taken seriously. Story 43, my dad did odd little things. He fought my mom and I because I wanted to wear thongs at 15, 16. He would not budge, so I do it behind his back. He didn't know until he switched my laundry from washer to dryer nearly a year later. I wasn't allowed to go to bathrooms in stores, restaurants, etc. alone until I was 15. Someone had to go with me, and if I was only with men, a guy, usually my dad, had to stand right outside the door real creepy like. And it continues still. I moved out for 2 years and lived alone 500 miles away from my parents. Worked the closing shift at a restaurant, and walked home at night. My dad had me text him when I was leaving work, and when I get home, and now that I've moved back in with my parents, I want to go jogging because we live in the country. I'm 20 years old, know most of my neighbors, and would jog past 2 sheriff's homes, and my dad still won't allow it. Not if I take a taser, not if I take pepper spray, not ever. Story 44, my niece got really sick when she was less than a year old. We were in the hospital, and I had gotten there late, nearly an hour after my brother did. They still hadn't been seen by a doctor, and the place was super dead patient-wise. I walked out of the room and up to the chatting nurse's station, growled at them that I need a doctor in room 2100. Now, doctor came in shortly after.